This is a true story. It happened in an Asian country where a couple made headlines because of their bitter divorce battle. A battle that didn't just involve money, property, or cars, but also the dogs they once raised together. Yet before everything fell apart, they had a marriage that everyone admired. Years ago, in the small town of Maplewood, there was a young couple, David and Linda. They weren't born into wealth, no inheritance, no fortune, but they had something far more valuable: love and devotion. David was a hard-working man, believing that with determination, he could change his fate. Linda, a gentle woman, was willing to put aside her own dreams to stand by her husband's side. They got married with nothing but a small, old house on a tiny piece of land. But it didn't matter, because they had each other. The early days of their marriage were tough. David worked multiple jobs, fixing farm equipment, buying and selling crops, just to make ends meet. Linda stayed home to take care of their two children, but she also took on sewing and part-time jobs to support the family. They saved every penny, dreaming of a brighter future. And no matter how exhausted David was, every evening, he would come home to eat dinner with his wife and kids. On rainy nights, they would sit together, tell stories, drink tea, and simply enjoy the warmth of their modest home. To the townspeople, they were the perfect family, a couple who had built their lives from nothing, hand in hand. As time passed, their efforts paid off. Business thrived, money flowed in. They built a bigger house, bought more land, a new car, and even took in a pack of stray dogs that often wandered near their home. From the outside, it looked like a fairy tale ending. From rags to riches, they had everything they once dreamed of. But there was one thing they never expected. As their bank accounts grew, the love that once held them together began to fade, and David was no longer the man Linda once knew. Dinners together became rare. David stopped rushing home after work. "Business is busy," he would say every time Linda asked why he was late. At first, she believed him, but then the whispers started. "Linda, I saw your husband driving someone around town the other day. David got a new car. He's dressing really nice these days." These comments seemed harmless, but they left Linda uneasy. And then one night, David came home drunk, the scent of unfamiliar perfume lingering on his clothes. Linda's heart shattered. That night she followed him, and the truth was laid bare. David had a mistress, a woman named Emma, a young widow from the outskirts of town. She would frequent David's store, pretending to browse, pretending to be a customer, when in reality she was waiting for an opportunity to get closer to him. One time, then twice, and before long they fell into each other's arms, as if morality had never existed. Linda felt betrayed to the core. The man who had once sworn to love her forever had thrown away their years together for another woman. She couldn't just stand by, and so she didn't. A furious confrontation erupted in the middle of Maplewood's busiest market. Linda stormed toward Emma, ripped the designer handbag from her hands, and slapped David across the face. "I stood by you through the hardest times, and now that you have money, this is how you repay me?" Linda screamed, tears streaming down her face. David didn't fight back. Maybe because he knew he was wrong. Maybe because he didn't expect Linda's rage to explode like this. But it didn't matter anymore. Because at that moment, Linda knew this marriage was over. She had no choice but to file for divorce. But Linda never imagined that this wasn't just the end of their relationship. It was the beginning of a vicious battle, one that would go beyond property, beyond money. Even their beloved dogs weren't spared. After the explosive fight in the marketplace, Linda sat in silence at home, staring out into the yard. There, Molly, the mother dog, lay curled up, her 5 puppies snuggled against her for warmth. They didn't know what was happening. They didn't understand what a divorce was. But Linda did. She couldn't stay in this marriage any longer. The man she had loved, the man she had built a life with, had changed. To him, family no longer mattered. Money, power, and luxury had become his only concerns. With a deep breath, she picked up a pen, and with a single stroke, she signed the divorce papers. Then she paused. How would the assets be divided? Linda had every right to what belonged to her. She wasn't greedy, but she also couldn't allow herself to be at a disadvantage. When the divorce papers reached David, he didn't hesitate. No anger, no regret. He simply shrugged and said coldly, "Divorce is fine, but everything is split equally. Not a single cent more for either of us." Linda froze. She had once believed that, even if their love had faded, he would at least let her go with some fairness. But no. Between them now there was nothing left, except numbers on a legal document. The division of assets was quickly outlined. The two-story house, split evenly. The land behind the house, split evenly. The delivery truck, sold and split evenly. The savings, split evenly. Everything was divided with perfect precision, not a single advantage for either side. Until they reached the dogs. This is where the real battle began. Linda turned to look at Molly, the mother dog, and her 5 puppies. She swallowed hard. "I'll take Molly and one of the puppies," Linda said. From across the room, David immediately objected. "Number Molly is the mother, and she's worth more. If you take her, then I'll take all 5 puppies." Linda stared at him in shock. "Are you treating them like property?" David shrugged, his voice indifferent. "Well, aren't they? You didn't care about keeping your relationship with me, so why do you suddenly care about a dog?" Linda stiffened. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. The man she had once shared meals with, shared a bed with, built a life with, now saw everything as nothing more than a cold negotiation. A bitter smile flickered across her lips. There was nothing left to say, and this argument over the dogs was only the beginning of an even uglier legal battle. The day of the trial. The courtroom in Maplewood County Court was packed. It was just a divorce case, yet the entire town was buzzing about it. Not just because of the assets, but because they were fighting over the dogs, dividing every last thing as if this was their final war. Judge Richardson glanced down at the case file, then looked up at the 2 people sitting across from each other. A couple who had once shared 10 years of marriage, once been the symbol of love and perseverance. Now there was nothing between them but cold, emotionless numbers. Linda's lawyer spoke first. "Let's handle the larger assets first." The morning session passed with calculated efficiency. The 2-story house split evenly, the land behind the house split evenly, the delivery truck split evenly, the savings split evenly. No sentiment, no compromise. Everything was divided exactly in half until they reached the dogs. A strange tension filled the courtroom. Molly, the mother dog. 5 puppies. How could they split them fairly? Linda took a deep breath and spoke slowly. "I want to keep Molly and one of the puppies." David's lawyer immediately objected. "That won't work. Molly is the most valuable one. If my client gives her up, then he should receive all 5 puppies." Linda's eyes narrowed. "He seriously wants all 5? How is that fair?" David smirked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Fair? I already gave you the mother. What else do you want?" The courtroom murmured. Some people even chuckled at the absurdity of the argument. But Linda? She wasn't laughing. The argument stretched on for over an hour. Linda refused to give up Molly and insisted on keeping at least 1 puppy. David refused to budge, demanding all 5. Neither side would back down. Judge Richardson sighed, rubbing his forehead. Throughout his career, he had believed that divorce was the end of a marriage. But now, watching these 2 people argue over every last detail, he realized something. Some divorces aren't an ending. They're just the beginning of a different kind of battle, one that is even more bitter and completely meaningless. He banged his gavel against the desk. "Court is adjourned. We will resume this afternoon." No one in the courtroom could have guessed that by the end of the day, an unexpected decision would turn this into one of the strangest divorce cases in Maplewood's history. The courtroom was just as tense that afternoon. No one had ever imagined that a pack of dogs could become the most hotly contested part of a divorce, but here they were. Judge Richardson flipped through the file, his voice laced with exhaustion. "All right, let's continue. With the dogs." He looked over the list again. 1 mother dog, 5 puppies. How could this be divided fairly? He set the papers down and spoke firmly. "Here's my decision. Linda will take the mother dog. David will take 4 of the puppies. Linda nodded immediately, but then another problem arose. What about the last puppy? Neither of them was willing to let the other have it. The courtroom erupted into another argument. Finally, after yet another heated debate, the most unexpected resolution was reached. Linda would take the mother dog, David would take 4 puppies, and the last puppy would be given to the court. The courtroom fell silent for a moment. Then came the whispers, and then the laughter. Judge Richardson raised an eyebrow. "Are you two serious?" David and Linda both nodded. The judge let out a long sigh, then banged his gavel against the desk. "Very well. The final decision has been made." The courtroom burst into laughter, and just like that, the trial was over. But no one would ever forget this case, because from that day forward, the Maplewood County Courthouse had a new resident, one tiny puppy, now known as the court's dog. In the end, after much back and forth, they both agreed on the strangest decision of the entire trial. Linda would take the mother dog, David would take 4 of the puppies, and the last puppy would go to the court. The entire courtroom fell silent. Judge Richardson looked up, raising an eyebrow. "Are you two serious?" David and Linda both nodded. The judge sighed, then firmly banged his gavel on the desk. "Very well. The final decision has been made." Laughter erupted throughout the courtroom. From that day forward, the Maplewood Courthouse had a new resident, one tiny puppy, now officially the court's dog. The trial seemed to be reaching its conclusion, yet the tension in the room refused to fade. Even though the judge had proposed the unusual solution of giving the 6th puppy to the court, neither side appeared satisfied with the outcome. Linda frowned. She had fought this far. Was she really going to let a helpless puppy be dragged into this meaningless dispute? David wasn't pleased either. He had wanted the upper hand, but now he was losing a puppy in the most ridiculous way possible. They locked eyes, challenging each other once more. And just like that, the argument started again. Linda placed her hands on the table, her voice firm. "I don't agree. The 6th puppy cannot belong to the court." David smirked. "Oh, so what do you want? To take the entire pack for yourself?" Judge Richardson, who had just begun to feel a brief moment of relief, rubbed his forehead for the 4th time that day. He was beginning to realize this wasn't just about the dogs. They weren't fighting over property. They were fighting each other. His voice grew sharper. "Do you two even know what you're doing? Have you thought about your children at all? Or are you only concerned about this pack of dogs?" The room fell silent. Then Linda let out a bitter laugh. Her eyes held a trace of sadness. "Children," she scoffed. "Your Honor, if he truly cared about his children, he wouldn't have betrayed me. I'm just fighting for what's rightfully mine." David slammed his hand on the table, frustrated. "Oh, cut the victim act. You're not losing anything here." The murmurs in the courtroom grew louder. The people of Maplewood had witnessed many divorces before, but never one as bitter and relentless as this. Judge Richardson took a deep breath, trying to keep his patience. Then, speaking slowly, he proposed a new solution. "All right, since neither of you can agree, I have another suggestion. You two will bid for the 6th puppy. Whoever offers the highest price gets to keep it." Linda's eyes widened. David chuckled. "You're telling us we have to pay to buy back our own dog?" Linda asked, disbelief in her voice. "That's correct," the judge answered bluntly. The entire courtroom burst into laughter. Some people even started making playful bets, guessing how high the price would go. David crossed his arms, looking at Linda with a smug grin. "Fine, I'll bid $100. Linda didn't hesitate. She pressed her lips together and immediately countered. $200. David raised an eyebrow. $250. Linda narrowed her eyes. $300. The courtroom roared with laughter. This was no longer a divorce trial. It had turned into a dog auction, right in the middle of court. Judge Richardson had no words left, but at this point, what else could he do? This was the only way to resolve the issue without wasting more time. David clenched his fists, then declared coldly, $400. Linda hesitated. $400 for a puppy, a ridiculous amount. But when she looked into David's eyes, she saw the truth. He didn't want the dog. He just wanted to win. She took a deep breath and, after a pause, said firmly, $500. The room erupted in gasps. David froze for a moment. No matter how cute the puppy was, it wasn't worth that much. He exhaled sharply, turning away. Fine, you win. Linda smirked, but deep down she felt no joy. She had won, but this wasn't the victory she had wanted. Judge Richardson sighed once more, then slammed the gavel down. It's settled. The sixth puppy belongs to Linda. This trial is officially over. The sound of the gavel echoed through the courtroom, but their story wasn't truly over yet, because even though their marriage had ended, they still weren't free from each other. The courtroom should have emptied after the heated bidding war, but then something completely unexpected happened. Linda had just finished signing the documents, confirming that she would keep Molly and one puppy, while David would take the remaining 4. Judge Richardson was preparing to conclude the session when David suddenly spoke up. I've changed my mind. I don't want to keep the 4 puppies anymore. The entire room froze. Linda turned to him, eyes wide in disbelief. What? Did you just say? David shrugged, his voice indifferent. I just wanted to win, but now that I think about it, raising dogs is too much trouble. I'm busy. I don't have time for that. The courtroom erupted in gasps. A few people chuckled, but Linda was fuming. She had just spent $500 to keep one puppy, and now David was throwing away his share as if none of it had mattered. Judge Richardson rubbed his temples, trying to stay calm. So, what do you want to do with the 4 puppies? David paused for a moment, then smirked. I'll donate them to the court. The room burst into laughter again. The judge blinked in disbelief. Are you serious? David nodded. Judge Richardson let out a long sigh, utterly defeated. He had handled countless divorce cases before, but never one that had spiraled this far into absurdity. After some discussion, the court finally decided to hand over the 4 puppies to the Maplewood Police Department, ensuring that they wouldn't be abandoned. And just like that, from a messy divorce, 4 innocent puppies suddenly became government dogs in the most unexpected way possible. But this still wasn't the biggest surprise of the day. Once everything had been settled, the trial finally came to an end. Judge Richardson banged his gavel firmly on the desk and declared, "That concludes the case. Assets have been divided, and all dogs now have rightful owners. The court officially recognizes the divorce between David and Linda." The courtroom fell silent for a brief moment. David and Linda remained in their seats, as if they had just walked through a storm, one they still hadn't fully processed. A marriage that had once been filled with love, once admired by the entire town, had now ended in the most bitter yet strangely ridiculous way possible. David was the first to stand. He adjusted his jacket, then walked out without saying a word. Linda watched him go, but she didn't call out to him. Between them, there was nothing left to say. As she gathered her divorce papers, her hands trembled slightly. Not because she regretted leaving David, but because she realized that after everything, she had lost a part of herself in this battle. Just as she was about to step out of the courtroom, she saw David standing by the door, his back turned to her. A brief hesitation. Then, David gave a small nod, a silent farewell. Linda stared at him for a moment, then slowly nodded back. No more accusations, no more anger. Just 2 people who had once loved each other, had once endured everything together. Now nothing more than strangers. And then, they each walked their separate ways, never looking back. After the trial ended, the puppies, the so-called court dogs, were officially handed over to the Maplewood Police Department. No one had expected that from a divorce case, 4 innocent puppies would suddenly become government property. At first, the officers at the station had no idea what to do with them. They had simply been ordered to take the dogs, but none of them were trained to care for animals. So instead of locking them in cages, they let the puppies roam freely around the station. And before long, the puppies became the heart and soul of the department. Each day, they silently observed the humans around them. They didn't understand legal disputes. They didn't know what divorce meant, but they did know one thing. Humans could love each other deeply and yet become strangers over the smallest of things. As time passed, the puppies grew up to become the department's unofficial police dogs. They weren't professionally trained, but they had a gift. They could sense emotions. Whenever an officer was feeling down, they would walk over and nuzzle their hand, as if offering comfort. From being fought over in court, they had now become beloved companions, bringing joy to an entire team. The story of the court dogs spread throughout the town. People still talked about the infamous divorce case, but instead of just remembering the bitterness between David and Linda, they remembered the dogs, the unexpected symbols of healing, even when everything else had fallen apart. And just like that, the dogs that had once been abandoned found a new family in the most unexpected way. David and Linda were now officially strangers. After the trial, each went their separate ways, carrying their share of the assets. But neither of them seemed truly happy. David went back to his business, but things weren't the same anymore. He had thought that, without a wife, he would have freedom, that he would finally live the life he had wanted. But strangely enough, even with everything he owned, something still felt missing. There was no dinner waiting for him anymore. The house, once filled with warmth, now felt empty. The people who had once admired his family now whispered behind his back. Linda wasn't any better. She had Molly and her puppy. But she had also lost something else, a part of herself. After years of fighting, she no longer knew what she had been fighting for. And then there were the children. Each had been assigned to live with one parent, but no matter who they stayed with, they still felt the loss. Maplewood was a small town. Nothing stayed a secret for long. People still saw David and Linda every day. But instead of the happy couple they once were, all they saw now were two lonely souls, walking in opposite directions. Money was still there. The house was still there. The dogs were still there. But the most important thing was gone, forever. And then slowly, they both began to realize, in a divorce, there are no winners, only people who lose in different ways. As time passed, David and Linda's divorce became a legend in Maplewood, both comical and tragic. People didn't just remember the absurd courtroom scene where a pack of dogs was divided like property. They also remembered two people who had once loved each other deeply, now turned into adversaries, all because their pride got in the way. David had once thought that cheating was just a small mistake, that life after divorce would be easier. But then he realized, losing the one person who had understood him from the very beginning wasn't as easy as he had imagined. Linda wasn't any better. She had fought to get her fair share, but in the end, she also came to understand. Fairness on paper could never fill the emptiness in her heart. They both lost, but neither of them truly won. Their divorce wasn't just about splitting assets. It became a lesson for the entire town. People in Maplewood realized something. Divorce isn't the problem. The real problem is how people treat each other after the love is gone. Because sometimes when love disappears, all that's left is pride. And pride makes people desperate to win, only to realize too late that they never got what they truly wanted. Somewhere in town, the dogs still ran freely, happy, playful, untouched by the bitterness they had once witnessed. Perhaps out of everyone involved in this story, they were the only true winners, because they had learned how to love without conditions.